a number of factors came together to bring about this interest that Mathew and his friends had in Aboriginal health. That particular group were one of the first in the state to deal with media analysis in their English exams during Year 12. When he gained entry into medicine, he became very enthusiastic about his subject and was looking at the media critically during the whole of his first year. At the same time, Brendan Nelson, who was the head of the AMA, had had his interest sparked in the situation that the Aboriginal population were facing medically and socially. And he started a media campaign. Mathew and his mates decided that there was no education coming to them as medical students and was complaining to one of his lecturers, Professor Roger Short, that this was happening. Roger, being a very enthusiastic teacher, simply turned to these students and said, "Do something about it." And they said, "Well, what could we do?" He said, "Well, organise a forum to see if you can learn something about it." He took them aside and gave them a list of phone numbers and people who would be interested at this forum and said, "Go to it." Later on, Brendan Nelson informed us that he was so amazed that a first-year student had the gall to ring him up in his office and say, "Come and talk to us," that he said yes. And he decided, along with a number of other very famous people, to come and address the group. That first occasion, at which I was not present, was very well attended and had a big impact on what was happening, and that was how it came about. The other major student involved in it was a girl called Annette Sanders, and she and Mathew had joined together to do the cooperation for arranging this forum.
It was pretty much a full lecture theatre in South 1, several hundred students and others and members of the faculty. The audience was very much taken or enthralled with the information provided, and I think the speakers were incredibly good at getting their points across, and it was obvious there was a major gap in Aboriginal health education, and this was a potential starting point for a way of addressing it within the faculty. But it was a very positive meeting, and a lot of enthusiasm by the participants and the lecturers and the presenters.
The day after the lecture, he was really very tired. He had a girlfriend who was at that stage studying at Bendigo University, and it was her birthday. And he decided the following morning, after the lecture had been held, he decided that he would go and visit her to celebrate her birthday. He drove up and he was due back at work. He was working in hospitality at the time, trying to get himself some money to go through uni. And he left Bendigo and took the Kilmore route home. And I don't know, but there was an altercation with a truck and he was dead on arrival of any help. He was killed. At that stage, Noel had taken our middle son into a university open day because he was trying to choose his subjects for his senior years, and I was at home with the youngest son because he had an orchestra practice at school that day. So our day rapidly went down from there. Yes. Within hours, Roger Short had contacted us and, of course, extended his commiserations. And within 2 days, he had come forward with the suggestion that this lecture be made a yearly event and that a paddle prize should be offered because Mathew had been a state paddler and had been reasonably successful at it. Tim Steele was the first person to undertake the next lecture. He had spent a year between school and first year medicine working on an Aboriginal community, getting to know how things worked, and he was a very good first choice of Roger's to start the whole thing off. Every year has been different. I find that the group always imprint their own ideas on what's been happening. In the early years, there were some entertainers as well as serious medical issues discussed. One thing that was consistent throughout the whole lot has been the extremely good feeling that everybody in that room has always had for what was happening and who the people were. A number of speakers have said it was a really warm and pleasant place to be.
Yeah, I could really only endorse Chris's comments of it's been enthusiastically embraced by the students and also by the presenters.
Well, the speakers have been astoundingly interesting. I've said a number of times to people that I meet that I have a very prejudiced view of Aborigines because I have seen the most successful and amazing people that you could possibly meet. I remember people like Puggy Hunter, who told us that the reason he was here today was because his grandmother had learnt to read. He was a very successful doctor in Sydney. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but the constant stories of achievement, real strength have come through always in those speakers. Very rarely have we seen, we've discussed problems, but it's been not only to discuss problems, but to try and seek solutions, which is really good. Oh, the students have been amazing. As an ex-secondary teacher, I'm still amazed at how young they were, but they all are bright and shiny and intelligent and enthusiastic, and that's amazing to see. I know we still have indications that all is not well. The statistics tell us that all is not well. But I have seen so many people who have come through, the numbers of skilled people that are increasing year by year. It's not good yet, but it's getting better, and this always makes me hopeful. I sometimes wonder whether this is an indulgence on our part. The first few years, I emotionally found this very, very difficult, this night very, very difficult. I still find it difficult, but I realise now that I usually am uplifted by what happens in the end, so that the dark days beforehand are usually compensated for a feeling of satisfaction afterwards. I'm hoping it's not an indulgence. We hope that some good might come of what he did start.
Many of the speakers have shining examples of what can be achieved in often difficult circumstances, and they frequently set the students challenges to think about, and perhaps career paths that they might take to continue this sort of work on. And I think they endeavour, and usually, I'm sure successfully, inspire students or certain students to take up these sort of courses of action, having exposed them to what the situation is. And it's not all, it's obviously some negatives, but it's not all negatives. There are quite a lot of positives, and this is endeavour to leave the audience with many ways forward.